But
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Gerardo. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
All right. I'm going to keep admitting people as they show up while also getting us started. So I've already spotlighted Dr. Ian Frank. I'm going to introduce him now. First, I want to say thank you, everybody for being here. And obviously, Dr. Frank, we're going to thank you like 48 times today, or maybe 96, or some multiple thereof. Dr. Ian Frank is professor of medicine at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. His clinical expertise is in HIV and AIDS and also LGBT health. His research expertise is in HIV vaccinology, prevention, and treatment. He's currently directing the third stage Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine study at the University of Pennsylvania. Matt and I are in that study, and we're so very grateful to be part of it. I know that there's other members of the Tango community who were able to become part, and we are all so grateful to you, Dr. Frank, for making that possible. I really think that the Tango community hit the jackpot when Dr. Frank decided just a year or two or so before the pandemic that he needed to learn Tango. He was, I will attest, on his way to becoming a wonderful, amazing Tango dancer before the pandemic. And we look forward to taking up that work when this is over. And basically, we're just so lucky that Dr. Frank is literally working every moment for the past year to bring nearer the moment when you will be here, we will be hugging, we will be dancing together again. So I will be asking you to mute after this, but if you could please unmute and start by really giving Dr. Frank the applause that he deserves every minute and probably gets pretty seldom. Everybody join me.
Hey.
We are so grateful for all the work you do and for taking time from your schedule to be here. So I'm about to turn it over to Dr. Frank, but I'm going to ask that everybody please make sure you're muted during the presentation. You can ask any questions you have in the chat. You can be putting them in all the way through, and we are going to have a Q&A period at the end. All right. I turn it over to you, Dr. Frank.
Thanks, Meredith. So first of all, nobody call me Dr. Frank, okay? You can. My name is Ian. That's what people call me. So please, no formalities among Tango dancers. And thank you for your applause. I can assure you that it's going to be a long time before you applaud my dancing, not because it's going to be a long time before we're dancing, but my dancing will not earn your applause anytime soon. So let me just disclose that. All right. So let me just start by thanking Meredith for asking me to do this. And I also want to say that it has really been a great pleasure for me to be learning Tango, especially with Meredith. She is an artist, and I am honored to have the opportunity to learn to dance with her, and to meet many of you along the way. So this is really just small payback for all I've learned and the kindness that she has shown me. So I just want to thank you, Meredith, and I really mean that most sincerely. So thanks. All right, you can see that.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, wonderful. So the title of the presentation is January 2021, the beginning of the end of COVID-19. And that is really where we are. This is the beginning of the end of this pandemic. It doesn't mean that the end is going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to be pretty. It doesn't mean that it's going to end quickly, but we are at the beginning of the end. And that's really the theme for this evening. Now, Meredith and I have been speaking about when would be the appropriate time to give this presentation. And we were speaking before the winter holiday, and we decided to move it into January. And it is so fortuitous that I am giving this talk today, not only because of the incredible day that it has been from the perspective of our nation and democracy, but from another really interesting perspective. So I want to share with you the first case of COVID-19 in the United States. On January 19th, 2020, a 35-year-old man came into an urgent clinic in Snohomish County, Washington, and he was diagnosed with COVID-19. So the first reported case of COVID-19 in the United States is exactly 1 year ago today. And in some ways, that just seems like it was around the corner. In some ways, it seems like a lifetime ago. But it's remarkable to think that we have been living with this pandemic for an entire year. Now, you may remember there was a breaking news story the next day. And President Trump at that time said, it's only one case. He flew in from China, which was true. The guy who was infected in the United States had just flown in from Wuhan, China. And he said, we got it under control. You probably recognize the other folks on the slide. Dr. Azar, the former head of the Department of Health. You see this?
Yes.
All right.
It's only one case. Famous last words.
All right. So, but you're not seeing the New England Journal anymore, right?
No, we see Trump.
Okay, you see Trump. All right, good. All right. So we've got Secretary Azar, Tony Fauci, Mike Pence, Robert Redfield, head of the CDC, Jerome Adams, former Surgeon General, he just resigned today. The only person in this group that is going to be involved in the next step of dealing with COVID-19 is Tony Fauci, who will remain head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. And in a lot of ways is guiding a lot of the medical decision-making around COVID-19. So, you know, there's really going to be two major themes with respect to the ending of the epidemic. One is information about the vaccines, and two is information about the rollout and the availability of the vaccines. So, you know, we have today, you know, a major, I think, milestone in advancing the availability of the vaccine. And that is now, you can see down here, we have inaugurated a president with a real plan to end the COVID-19 epidemic. And I will give the Trump administration some credit along the way. I think they made a couple of good business decisions with respect to the development of the vaccines but the rollout plan has not been as smooth as one would hope. And I think we will see a better job of that in the future. So I want to give you a little bit of backstory here. So this is an electron micrograph of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. You can see on the outer portion of the envelope of the virus, this little hazy dot. These are the spike proteins, and they form a crown around the virus. That's what gives the virus the name coronavirus. And this little protein at the end, that's the spike protein. And that is the protein that binds to the receptor on cells. And that is the target of the immune response that the vaccines are eliciting. So all of the vaccines that I will be speaking about this evening are designed to have our bodies make an immune response, predominantly an antibody response, against this one particular protein. Now, let me say, I am going to, I'm going to treat you like a medical audience. I know that most of you are lay people. I'm assuming you're lay people. I'm going to show you medical stuff, but I will try to explain it in ways that lay people can easily understand. And I'm doing this in part because I like to share data. I want you to see the facts. I want you to see what I see when I am reading journals and when I am learning about the science. And so I apologize if some of it becomes boring, the way some science can sometimes be. But like I said, I will try to make it pretty straightforward. And please put a question in the chat box or unmute yourself and interrupt me. It's fine to ask questions along the way. And I will certainly give you time to ask questions at the end. So a little bit about epidemiology. This is a map of the world. Just look in the center. And you can pull this up on the Johns Hopkins website, where there are excellent resources that will describe the COVID-19 epidemic. And so this information I downloaded on Monday or Sunday, the 18th, 8:21 p.m. The number of reported cases of COVID-19 across the globe, over 95 million cases. You can see that over here on the left, and over 2 million deaths. This is certainly an underestimate of the number of cases of COVID-19, because in many countries like India or Brazil or other developing countries that don't have the same testing capability that we have in the United States or exists in Western Europe, there are a lot of people who do not go reported as being infected. So these aren't estimates. These are the number of people reported to be infected with SARS-CoV-2 over time. And also let me distinguish, two things. One, SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus, and COVID-19 is the name of the disease that's caused by the virus. So I may talk about SARS-CoV-2. If I do say that, I'm talking about the virus. If I'm talking about COVID-19, I'm talking about the disease caused by the virus. So you can see we've got the greatest number of cases. We have the highest number of deaths. And that may be reality. It may be in part, again, the fact that we probably do more testing than happens in India, for example. But we have not done as good a job at controlling the epidemic as many other countries. Here's a map of the US, and the darker the red, the more relative cases of COVID-19, the greater the rate. It's not the greatest number of cases, because here in North Dakota, there are not that many people. But in some areas of North Dakota, we've got the greatest percentage of residents of North Dakota that have been infected in comparison to other places in the United States. And although I don't want to get into politics too much, it is not hard to see that where the greatest density of infections are in the United States, it's in places in the country where people have been more hesitant to wear masks. Wearing masks work, and we just need to do it. We need to do it to protect ourselves. We need to do it to protect our family, our friends, and our fellow citizens. This is an obligation that I, as a physician, feel everybody should accept. Here's Philadelphia. And I'm showing you a couple of things on this slide. The number of tests that have been done, and this is in a 1 week interval. And you can see in April, we weren't doing a lot of tests, but down below, you can see the number of people diagnosed. And so there were few tests, a lot of diagnoses. At that point in time, the only people that were being tested were people that have symptoms. Now, testing is a lot more readily available. We're doing a lot of tests, and we're identifying a lot of people with relatively asymptomatic disease. I know people that are getting tested every week. Some of that is happening because in our healthcare system now, they want some people to be tested because the students are back on campus and they want to keep the campus safe. They want to be able to quarantine individuals who are recently diagnosed. But it's common for people to now seek testing if they have potentially been exposed to other individuals. So some of the increased rate of diagnoses is related to the fact that we're doing more tests. There's no doubt about it, but you can see that there's been a couple of waves of infections in the Philadelphia area, one in the spring and one that happened in late October, early November. And we see some peaks in the number of new diagnoses that are happening in the week or two after the Thanksgiving holiday. And then we see actually a decline. It's not clear why the rate has declined. One would have worried that we would have seen more cases after the Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa holiday at the end of December, but we haven't seen that. So maybe people were gathering with their families during the Thanksgiving holiday, and maybe they said, okay, we had our family time, and now we'll stay in isolation for the moment. So a complicated epidemic happening in multiple waves across the United States, across the globe. So this is the problem that we face, and there will be a lot more infections when it's over. So let me say something about the clinical illness that we see caused by this virus. It is really complicated, and it ranges from people having absolutely no symptoms or very few mild symptoms to very severe illness. And the illness that is most associated with this disease is lung infection, pneumonia. So what I'm showing you here are CT scans a cross section. We're cutting people in half, and here's their heart, and here are their lungs. And lungs in this image are dark. That's a healthy lung. This is a normal lung here. And you can see somebody with mild COVID-19 pneumonia. So you've got some whitish areas of consolidation. This is some fluid and inflammation in the lung. And over here on the right-hand side, you've got pretty severe disease. This individual is going to be short of breath. This individual is going to need oxygen because you don't see a lot of healthy lung here. And it can even be worse than this particular image. But this is an incredibly complicated illness. And we now appreciate that COVID-19 can cause a lot of different problems. It can cause abnormalities in insulin and glucose metabolism. It can affect the liver. People have GI symptoms. It can cause rashes on the skin. Some people have neurological conditions. One of the most common symptoms that people complain about are decreases in smell or taste. We sometimes see people with heart problems, kidney problems, and people get blood clots. Some of these things happen in a cyclical or wave-like way. People get sick, they recover, and then something else can happen. And sometimes that something else is the heart problem or the blood clot problem. Some of this illness is caused by the virus replicating, and some of it is caused by the immune response that people are making against the virus. So who is most likely to get hospitalized? Well, it's older folks. So this is data from the Centers for Disease Control reporting on the proportion of individuals or the number of individuals per 100,000 population that are being hospitalized with a COVID-19 diagnosis. And so this is folks over 85. This dark blue, folks 75 to 84. Green, 65 to 74. This lighter blue, 50 to 64. And yellow, people ages 8 to 49. So the older you are, the more likely, if you get this disease, you are going to be hospitalized. And it's not just age, it's the number of underlying medical conditions. So medical conditions that we will count here include diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, neurological conditions, obesity, being immunocompromised or taking a medication that can have an impact on the immune system, chronic lung disease, and a couple of other conditions. And if you have one of these conditions, you are 2.5 times more likely to be hospitalized compared to somebody who's got no conditions. And if you've got 2 conditions, you're 4.5 times more likely to be hospitalized. If you've got 3 conditions, you're 5 times more likely to be hospitalized. So having underlying medical conditions puts you at risk of being hospitalized. Also, men are a little bit more likely to be hospitalized than women, and Blacks are more likely to become hospitalized than non-Blacks. We don't have a good understanding of why some of these factors are the case, but this is the data that we see. And if we look at the probability of people dying in the hospital, again, there is a relationship between age and mortality. If you're over 85, you have 11 times the risk of dying. 75 to 84, over 7 times. 65 to 74, almost 6 times. 50 to 64, over 3 times. And then there's an increased risk of dying if you're a man, if you're immunocompromised, if you got kidney disease, lung disease, heart disease, neurologic disease, or diabetes. So this is important not only because it tells us who really needs to observe more caution, maintain social distancing, wearing a mask, but it's this data that has led to the recommendations to vaccinate people in a certain order, because we want to vaccinate first those individuals that are more likely to become ill if they acquire this infection. So we have advances in COVID-19 treatment. They're not really kind of home run kinds of treatments. They work, a little bit. They're like singles. We've got an antiviral drug, remdesivir. It works in hospitalized patients if you need oxygen. It doesn't really benefit you that much if you're already in the intensive care unit. It doesn't benefit you if you are not hospitalized. And that's probably because if you're in the intensive care unit, you've probably been sick for a while. There's not a lot of virus replicating in your lung at that point in time. So taking an antiviral drug isn't going to do very much for you. It's the immune system that's causing the damage, or the damage is already done, and we've just got to wait for the body to heal itself. And if you're older, and if you have underlying medical conditions, that process is slower. There are monoclonal antibodies that have been developed. These are antibodies that have basically been cloned from somebody who's been infected with COVID-19, that by itself, these antibodies inactivate the virus. And they work a little bit if you're not hospitalized, or if you've been hospitalized and you're on oxygen or don't need oxygen, but not much benefit if you're in the intensive care unit. And then there's been a lot of talk about convalescent plasma. This is taking basically the cell-free portion of the blood of people that have been infected with COVID-19 and giving that to people who are newly infected. We've done that with hepatitis B over the years. We've done it with other diseases. It's safe to give convalescent plasma. It's purified. We know there's no infections in the plasma because it's been screened appropriately. And that may be helpful in some cases. And then we have other strategies that don't inhibit the virus's replication, but modify the immune response. In fact, these three drugs, dexamethasone, which is a steroid, baricitinib, and tocilizumab, which inhibit the immune response in a couple of different ways, all of these immune suppressing agents may be beneficial in certain kinds of scenarios. So sometimes we want to stop the virus from replicating. Sometimes we want to suppress the immune response. And in general, you don't want to suppress immune responsiveness early. You may want to do that later. So I'm showing you this because I want you to understand that there's advances in treatment. They don't work in a spectacular fashion. It's the reason why death rates are still pretty high in individuals who get this disease. But there's some progress here, more to come. But what I really hope is that we can prevent this infection long before we have better treatments available for it. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to talk about vaccines. Vaccines are the path back to a normal life for us. It is the only path. You will hear people talk about herd immunity. You have to have more than 75% of a population that has been exposed to an infection, maybe even higher proportions to really protect the community. In the communities with the highest rates of COVID-19, there's maybe 15 or 20% of the population that has been exposed and has an immune response. So to achieve this level of herd immunity, we will need to see 4 times the number of people infected, which will be 4 times the number of people dying. And in fact, there will be other people who die who are not dying of COVID-19, because if we have that many people getting this infection, hospitals will be closed, and people who have other medical conditions will not be able to get medical care because hospitals in communities that are experiencing overwhelming COVID-19 epidemics don't have a lot of beds available. In this recent wave of COVID-19 infections, there were over 180 people hospitalized at Temple. Temple, I think, has got a capacity of about 650 beds. So a quarter of the people hospitalized at Temple University Hospital have COVID-19. At HUP, we peaked at about 100 with this recent wave. So it's about 1/8 of our hospital beds occupied by people with COVID-19. We created inpatient space in the outpatient building in order to accommodate the number of individuals that needed to be hospitalized. We have more resources in Philadelphia, hospital resources, than in many other many other cities in our country. And the cities have more resources than rural communities. So it is easy for this disease to overwhelm the medical capacity when there is a big epidemic in a locale. Now, you may have heard that the Operation Warp Speed, which is going to be renamed, I don't know what the new name is going to be, but it's not going to be Warp Speed anymore, has accelerated the process of developing the vaccines or other treatments for COVID-19. This is the usual process. When we're doing any kind of drug development or vaccine development, we start with phase 1. It's really designed, the purpose of the phase 1 study or studies is for safety. Usually a couple of different doses get tested. In this case, with a vaccine, we're looking at the immune response. We may study maybe 100 people. When that is completed and we have all the information, we move to phase 2. Maybe we study a couple of different doses, more safety, a little bit more data on what kind of immune response people get in a population that's a little bit more diverse, maybe by age or by race, ethnicity, maybe 400 people in the phase 2 study. When that is complete, then we move to phase 3. This is the stage where we really want to see if the product is effective. And in these prevention studies, the big prevention studies have included 30,000 or more people to see if the vaccine protects people from getting infected, and we get a lot more safety data. So this is the typical process, one phase after the other. And what's happened with COVID-19 is we're doing it all in an overlapping way. We're starting with phase 1, but then we're quickly moving into phase 2, even while we're still getting information in phase 1. We're starting the phase 3 studies even before we have the phase 2 data based upon what we're learning in the phase 1. Some of it is changing as we go. It's what needs to be done when you're dealing with a medical problem of this magnitude and severity, that's having the kind of economic impact it's having, not only on our society, but worldwide. There really are no shortcuts, though, that are being taken. We're doing it all. It's a process that has been accelerated. That's the important thing to understand. And I want to give you an idea of just how accelerated it is. So this is the development timeline for the first approved vaccine, the Pfizer or BioNTech vaccine. Remember, this illness was first observed in December of 2019. By February 2020, 3 months later, this company, BioNTech, was doing studies of a prototypic vaccine in animal models, and then moved into humans with the first phase 1 study in March. That's P101, phase 1. P201, that's phase 2 study happening in May, and the phase 3 study started in July. That is really fast. And it is a testimony to where we are scientifically. Science these days is pretty incredible. And you can say what you want about the Chinese, but Chinese scientists sequenced this virus 2 weeks after it was discovered. And that scientific milestone enabled companies to make vaccines with this type of speed. Warp speed would have happened because the scientific and medical industry recognized the need and, in some sense, an economic opportunity to make some money. Big pharmaceutical companies make money by developing products fast. And so there's an economic incentive to do this, but it would have happened regardless. What the government did do was it loosened up the FDA a little bit. So the FDA didn't mandate this very slow plodding kind of development process. It let the science move quickly. They agreed to review things at warp speed. Usually they have a month to get back to you, sometimes 6 months, in approving certain kinds of studies. Here, they did it fast. They did it overnight. So the government made it happen quickly, and we should be thankful for that. There are 6 vaccines that are ahead of the pace in the warp speed program. And I want to tell you a little bit about them. So the Pfizer studies, I'll show you more data about Pfizer, but this is the one that started first. Then the Moderna company, small biotech company, don't have any approved products yet. Both of these companies, Pfizer, developing this product that was really made by this biotech company called BioNTech. Pfizer and Moderna are making an RNA vaccine. I'll tell you a little bit more about RNA vaccines in a moment. AstraZeneca, you may have heard this company is making a vaccine that was developed at Oxford University in the United Kingdom, using an adenovirus, which is a common cold virus, but one that's unique to chimpanzees. This particular adenovirus doesn't affect humans. Johnson & Johnson, making a different kind of adenovirus vectored vaccine developed by a guy named Dan Baruch at Harvard. And then Novavax and Sanofi Pasteur, together with GlaxoSmithKline, making vaccines that are a little bit more traditional, a protein-based vaccine. All of these vaccines are somewhat similar in the sense that they're all designed to make an immune response against that spike protein. But there's a carrier or a packaging of the virus that's a little bit different with the mRNA vaccines or the adenovirus vectored vaccines or those that are protein-based. On the right-hand column here, you can see the number of doses of vaccine that have been purchased by the government. This is another good thing that the Warp Speed program did. They guaranteed the manufacturers the purchase of product. This doesn't mean that there's 100 million doses of any of these vaccines that are available at this moment in time. It just means that the government has agreed to buy it. And these agreements were in place even before the phase 3 studies of these vaccines were done. The Sanofi phase 3 study isn't slated to begin until March. The Novavax phase 3 study just started at the end of the year. So all of these companies were guaranteed to have at least some of their costs deferred by US government purchase. Many governments actually have formed these agreements, and paying the companies to develop these products removed some of the risk for these companies and helped to speed up the process. The vaccines aren't expensive. The doses range between $15 and $20 a dose. With all of these vaccines, except for Johnson & Johnson, you need 2 doses. Johnson & Johnson, you need a single dose. So the most expensive vaccine in the mix here cost $40 for a complete vaccination series. And nobody in the United States is going to have to pay for it. These vaccines are being provided free of charge. You know, nobody's insurance is going to be charged. Medicare, Medicaid, no charge to any insurers. The government is paying for these vaccines. All right, let me tell you about how an RNA vaccine works. And let me actually start by telling you that the guy who really one of 2 people that are responsible for the development of RNA into a vaccine-based technology works at the University of Pennsylvania in my infectious disease division. His name is Drew Weissman. He is a very understated guy. He was working with another colleague, Marianne Carrico, who was in the microbiology department at Penn. They were working on developing RNA for therapy. And they just got into a conversation by a copier machine. Neither of them knew what the other ones were doing, but they overcame a couple of very fundamental problems in working with RNA, helping to make it stable and helping to make it more immunogenic. And these advances are really what's made this technology possible. So the RNA is this little squiggly line here. Our genetic material is DNA. And DNA gets converted to RNA, and then RNA is used as the map to make our proteins. So the vaccine is an RNA molecule that's in a little globule of fat. It's a microscopic globule. You couldn't see it. But that little glob of fat makes the RNA stable It makes it formulatable into a vaccine. And actually, it's the fat that causes a lot of people to have side effect after getting the vaccine. So you get a shot, here's your shot, it's going into muscle. This particle gets taken up by a cell called an antigen presenting cell. And then pieces of now that spike protein get expressed on the surface of the antigen presenting cell. And the immune cells, B cells, which make antibodies, and T cells, which are part of the cellular immune response, they fight infection on their own. They recognize this little protein that's on this antigen presenting cell. The B cells get activated, they replicate, they become a cell called a plasma cell, and plasma cells make antibodies, and then the antibodies bind to the virus. That's the way these vaccines work, the RNA vaccines work. Now, what do we need in a COVID-19 vaccine? This is an important thing. It's an important question to consider. Do we need a vaccine that will protect us from becoming infected? Do we need a vaccine that will protect us from developing disease? Do we need a vaccine that will prevent us from becoming hospitalized or developing some other serious complication? And actually, the way I think about it, we only need a vaccine that will prevent us from becoming hospitalized or to develop a serious complication. That's the problem with this viral infection. A small percentage of people who get it, maybe about 5% or 6% of people will be hospitalized, but 2% of people who get it will die. And you don't want to be somebody who gets hospitalized, or you don't want to be somebody who's going to die from this. If you got a disease that was mild, like a bad cold, you could, if you were sick for 2 days and then got better and there were no serious complications, you would say, all right, that's not terrible. I can live with that. So we only need something that's going to prevent serious disease. We don't know yet whether the vaccine will protect us from becoming infected. I'm going to share some data with you, but all of the data that we really know is whether the vaccines prevent us from getting disease. We don't know if it will prevent us from getting exposed to the virus and making an immune response against the virus that we get exposed to. We don't know if people who get the vaccine can carry the virus without symptoms and potentially infect anyone else. I'll come back to that concept a little bit later. All right, let me show you some data. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine. This is the efficacy data from that Pfizer Phase 3 vaccine study. So people come into the unit, they're randomized. Everybody gets a shot. Some people get a placebo, some people get the real vaccine. And nobody knows, except for the pharmacist who's drawing the vaccine up in the syringe, who gets what. So at time 0 over here, that's when everybody gets their first shot. This is a 2-shot series. In this study, people are getting shots at day 0 and day 21. And you can see that right around day 10, these lines start to diverge. You can see it a little bit clearer over here. What you're seeing here is basically this down over here. And as we follow people over time, you see that the people who get the vaccine are very unlikely to become infected. As you go up here, the more people are getting infected. So it's maybe 0.3% of the population is getting COVID-19. I misspoke. They're not getting infected, they're getting COVID-19 disease. So the way people get followed in these studies is they fill out a diary card and we call them on the phone. And we say, hey, do you have any symptoms? Or people who develop symptoms, they call us and they say, I've lost my sense of smell. I'm having fevers. I'm starting to get diarrhea. And then we either go to their home and test them, or they come to us and test them, or we've given them the equipment to test themselves. And then we see if they now are infected with the virus. But we only suspect that because they have told us, or we've asked them if they have symptoms. This vaccine is 82% effective after the first dose. It is 95% protective after the second dose. And there is only one person, I'm sorry, I'm trying to point things and it's, if it's too sensitive, it advances the slide. Only one person who got the vaccine developed an illness that's severe enough to wind them to have them end up in the hospital. That's really good. There are over 21,000 people who got this vaccine. Over 21,000 people who got the placebo. Only one person with severe illness who got this vaccine. One person out of 50 who got infected. That is really good. That is a good vaccine as vaccines go. If we look at different groups of people, older folks, men or women, white folks, black folks, whatever country they live in, we basically see similar rates of protection. So there's no difference if you're over 65, 95% rate of protection, or 16 to 55, similar rates of protection. If you're a man, you're a woman, similar rates of protection. If you're black or white or Latinx, similar rates of protection. And it doesn't matter where you live, it's basically similar rates of protection. This vaccine works, it doesn't matter who you are. I want to share some now basic science with you. This slide shows you the antibody levels that people are making. So here is days 1, people are getting the shot, they don't really have antibodies. This is just background. Or some people may be infected, may have already been infected, we don't know. After the first shot, you can see people are starting to make antibodies. After the second shot, the antibody levels go higher. It's similar antibody levels. It doesn't matter what age you are. And that's why the vaccine works just as well if you're over 75 or if your age is 15 to 55, because the immune response you make is similar. Over here, all the way on the right-hand side, this is blood from people who got COVID-19. This is their antibody levels. These are people who are hospitalized with COVID-19. This vaccine makes an immune response that's as good or better than what we see with natural infection. That's a good vaccine. That was sort of all antibodies. These are antibodies that we call neutralizing antibodies. These antibodies can inactivate virus by themselves. And in that pink box there, you see the range of neutralizing antibodies from people who were infected with COVID-19. Here are the, it's an arithmetical way to demonstrate the various levels of response. But basically, this is almost the entire population here. And you can see almost everybody is developing an immune response that will inactivate the virus that is as good or better than what we see in people who got infected. Here's the Moderna study. So the second RNA vaccine, what we have available now. And you can see this figure looks pretty similar to what I just showed you with the Pfizer study. These vaccines, the 2-shot series, are day 1, and this is after 4 weeks rather than 3 weeks. You can see again some protection that starts after the first week. And after the second shot, there aren't a lot of people who get the vaccine that are getting symptoms. The vaccine is 94% protective, but it is 100% protective from severe disease. 100%. There is nobody who got the vaccine to date. These people are still being followed who has been hospitalized with COVID-19. So these are the 2 vaccines that we have available now. Complicated slide, but I want to make a simple point. This is data from the Johnson & Johnson or Janssen vaccine study that Meredith is, and Matt are in. Meredith, because you acknowledged it, I said it. I wouldn't have said anything had you not made that announcement. But I'm showing this data really for you because I want you to see that folks that get the high dose in this vaccine study, this is an earlier phase study, not the one that you're participating in, but in an earlier phase study, after a single dose, people develop high antibody levels that are similar or exceed what we see in people who are infected. This is the vaccine study where people are getting only a single dose because there's really not that much difference between 1 dose and 2 doses in this vaccine study. This is an important study because having a vaccine where we can only give 1 dose and see protection will mean that we could potentially vaccinate more people rather than having vaccines that require 2 doses. We will probably have an answer to this study in the next couple of weeks. And the people that are in the Pfizer and Moderna study, those people who got the placebo are coming in, they're getting vaccine now. The people who got the vaccine are being followed, and we will do something similar with this study after we know the level of benefit. People who come in, people will be unblinded, we'll tell people what they got. People who got the placebo will have the option of getting the real thing. Now, there's a lot of hesitancy to get these vaccines. This is data from the Pew Foundation. And in May, September, and November, a large population, several thousand people were asked, if you could get the COVID-19 vaccine today, would you do it? In dark green, people said definitely yes. Lighter green, probably yes. This color, whatever it is, probably no. And this sort of orange-brown color, definitely no. So in November, you had people who said, sorry.
I thought you were just desperate to see all of us.
I am desperate to see all of you in person. A lot of people are hesitant to get the vaccine.
I'm so sorry. We're seeing the app again, so I'm not sure we're going to see the slideshow from here. Stupid PowerPoint. You may have to unshare your screen and share it again with whatever you did last time.
All right, let's try it again. You see that?
Yep, that looks great.
All right. A lot of people are hesitant to get the vaccine. There's a lot of complicated reasons for this. Some of it, I think, is because, this illness has been politicized. There's a lot of mistrust. All I can say is trust the science. The people in my life who I love, I want to see them vaccinated. That's my greatest recommendation to you all. I would love to see you all vaccinated when the vaccine is available to you. All right, so some safety questions that people have. Can I get COVID-19 from the vaccine? That's a fear that some people have. So again, here is the picture of the virus. And that little colored dot, that's the spike protein. It's just a little piece of the virus. You can't get infected by just getting exposed to what ultimately is just a little piece of the virus. You need the whole virus for the virus to replicate. And here's the analogy I use for people. Over here on the right, that is a car. You will recognize a number of different components. There's an engine, a battery, a muffler, and there is a tire, a wheel. That tire or wheel cannot transport you anywhere. You need that whole car in order to get wherever you're going. It's the same thing. In order for you to get infected, you need the whole virus. In order for you to move, you need the whole unit of transportation working. You cannot get infected just from getting the vaccine. Can this genetic material integrate into your gene? Answer, no. You inject the RNA into your arm. The RNA does go into cells, but it does not go into the nucleus of cells. And it's the nucleus where your genetic material is. It also is RNA. Your genetic material is DNA. It cannot get integrated into your DNA. It doesn't last forever in your cell. It makes the protein, it does its job. The body then eliminates it because the body doesn't want RNA hanging out where it doesn't belong. So this genetic material or this RNA cannot become part of your genetic material. What about all those cases of anaphylaxis that you're hearing about? Those people who get the shot and 15 minutes later, they're really sick. This is the latest data. This is from last week. 36 confirmed cases of anaphylaxis, about 6.1 cases per 1 million doses of vaccine. So one case per about 140,000 people who get vaccinated. Actually, it's more like 160,000 people who get vaccinated. The risk is low. It's actually more common in women than men. Most of the people who are getting this have a history of allergies, including a severe allergic reaction. So the recommendation is if you don't have a history of allergies when you get a vaccine, you wait 15 minutes and then you can go. If you've got a history of severe allergies, you wait a half an hour because almost all of these reactions happened within 30 minutes of getting the shot. What people are more likely to experience are what we call reactogenicity symptoms. They're, the relative inconvenience of getting a shot, and you're familiar with them because they happen sometimes if you get the flu shot, sometimes if you get Shingrix. And this is a slide that shows a number of these: fever, fatigue, headache, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, muscle and joint aches and pains. And the slide basically shows that it's more likely to happen if you're younger rather than older. It happens in a lot of people. It's more likely to happen after your second shot than after your first shot. It's rare that people call this anything more than mild or moderate in severity, and it's usually over in a day or two. So you may get this vaccine, you may feel like you're getting infected with COVID-19, or you've got COVID-19 because you've got some symptoms. You don't have COVID-19. It's your immune response that's making a reaction to the vaccine. It's not a bad thing. Not everybody gets it. So if you get this and you don't have a reaction, it doesn't mean you're not responding to the vaccine. It just means you didn't get a reaction. There's no relationship between having these symptoms and a better immune response. So you don't have to worry about that. And it's a similar story with the Modernist study. You're more likely to get these with the second shot, and more than half of people will have it, but not everybody. So you can maybe expect this, but don't be troubled by it. Some other common questions that people have. Can I get a vaccine if I was infected? Answer is yes, you should get the vaccine. But we want people to wait until all of their symptoms are over and they're out of quarantine. Can I switch products? Can I get one shot with one vaccine and a second shot with the other? It's generally not recommended. People are likely to do it. There's going to be a study organized to track people. I think it's safe, but we don't have a lot of information right now. Can I get the COVID-19 vaccine and the flu shot or some other vaccine at the same time? It's probably okay, but the studies separated them. So I would urge you to separate a COVID-19 vaccine from a different vaccine by 2 or more weeks. Suppose you're late getting the second shot. Is that a big problem? Do you need to start again from the beginning? No, just get the next shot whenever you can. There's actually some data with a different vaccine that I haven't spoken about, the Novavax vaccine, that suggests that the longer you wait, rather than wait 4 weeks if you waited 8 weeks or 12 weeks, you had a better immune response than if you waited 4 weeks in between your 2 doses. Do I need to wear a mask after I get my vaccine? For the moment, the answer is yes. We don't know if the vaccine is going to protect people from carrying the virus or spreading it to others. When we've got the majority of the population vaccinated, we can throw away these masks. All right, how are these vaccines being distributed? This is complicated, and this is one of the problems that we have right now. The companies are manufacturing them. In the case of Pfizer, they're being directly sent to states. In the case of Moderna, there's a company that's doing some of the packaging and then it's going to states. The federal government is just basically coordinating the shipment of the vaccines to states. And then the states are figuring out how to get it to cities or rural areas or various locales. And states have different strategies, different priorities. It's not consistent. So there's not really one distribution strategy to deliver these vaccines in the United States. It's 50 different strategies. And it's not ideal, but it's the way the country often works. In Pennsylvania, these are the priorities. And you've probably heard about this priority system. It's, I hate when people do this. There's 4 groups, but we don't call it 4 groups. We call it group 1 and 2, and there's 3 different groups in one. I don't know why we call it why don't we call it 1, 2, 3, and 4? I think this is the kind of thing that people do when they don't want to give you the bad news. They try to give you bad news by saying, it's not really so bad. You're in 1C, but you're really not in group 3. You're in 1, but it's C, So there are really 4 groups. The first one, healthcare personnel, people who live in long-term care facilities. Those are the 2 conditions that the CDC uses to define group 1A. In Pennsylvania, group 1A also includes individuals who are age 65 or older and individuals who are 16 to 64 with underlying medical conditions. I think that this is a reasonable approach. It makes more people eligible. We need to just give this vaccine to as many people as we can, as quickly as we possibly can. That needs to be the strategy. And the people that are more likely to be ill if they get it, they should be first up. I've gotten my vaccine because I'm a healthcare personnel, but honestly, there are people who are more deserving and more at risk than I am. And so I feel lucky, but I'm Jewish, and my mother instilled this guilt kind of thing. And I'm a little bit guilty that I've already gotten my vaccine because, like I said, there are other people who probably are more deserving than me, even though, I am a healthcare provider. Group 1B, other people who live in congregate settings, first responders, those would be police, fire, ambulance crews, people who work in the food and agricultural industry, postal workers, transportation workers, teachers, childcare providers, manufacturers, clergy. They're in this group. 1C are other essential workers, and then group 2 are basically healthy folks ages 16 to 65. So that's the priority. I'd like to see as many people get vaccinated as soon as possible. The process hasn't happened as quickly as we would have hoped. The original target was to have 200 million doses distributed by this time in January, and we're about at 14 million. Some of that is because manufacturing has been a little bit slower than we would have hoped. Some of it is because some of the studies are happening slower than we've hoped. And some of it is because, the government made the decision to hold back the second doses for people who were getting a vaccine that needed 2 shots, rather than to just get the vaccine, even if it's just 1 shot, to as many people as possible. And I support that. I want to see as many people as possible get 1 shot quickly, and then we'll worry about the second shot for people who have gotten a vaccine that requires a second shot, because that 1 shot is protective. And that's what we need as quickly as possible. So look, this is just the United States, and this is a global pandemic. This I took from the AstraZeneca company website. You can see these little symbols, this little handshake. It's regions of the world where there have been agreements between that government and the company to purchase vaccines. So 300 million doses in the US, 20 million in Canada, 100 million in Brazil, 150 million in the Caribbean, up to 400 million in the European Union. China has agreed to purchase 200 million, Australia, Japan, India. There's a lot more I could say about the vaccine, but until we've made sure that everybody has access to these vaccines, it's not going to be totally normal. One of the things that I've really appreciated about the Argentine tango community is it's a group of people who like to travel. And my goal is to become a good enough dancer that I could go to different places in the world. I can go to Argentina, I can go to Berlin, I can go to China, and I can, I can figure out where I can go to dance, and I can just show up with, my partner Phyllis, and we can just have a great time dancing, anywhere in the world. I want that. And for us to get there, we all need to ensure that these vaccines are not just available in the US, but are globally available. I think that that is an important message that we have all hopefully learned earlier in our lives, but one that I think is resonating for me today. So, I've spoken more than I should have. I can talk too much. I'm excited about my work. I like to share it. I apologize if I've gone overboard, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, Meredith has my email address. It's Frank I at, you can send it to Frank I at upenn.edu, and I'll answer it. If I don't answer it, you may have gone to into my spam folder, and I apologize for that.
Say that once more because I'm typing it. Frank I at upenn.edu.
Frank I at upenn.edu.
There, it's in the chat,
Put it in
everybody.
the chat. So thank you very much. And like I said, I'm happy to stay with you and answer any questions that you have.
So we've had many, many great questions, and I've tried to condense them. And I know they're still coming in. But first question, when will we know if being vaccinated prevents us from being infected and possibly transmitting the virus to other people? Because that's very crucial for Tango, right? That we can not only not get seriously ill ourselves, but not make other people potentially ill.
We're going to have that information soon because the studies that are going on, when people are coming in and being unblinded, we're doing a COVID-19 test, a swab. So we'll see how many of them are carrying the virus in the absence of symptoms. And we'll look at all of these different vaccine studies. The studies that are being done now include hundreds of thousands of people across the globe. So these studies are happening in Africa, they're happening in Asia, they're happening in South America. And so we'll have that information relatively soon. Again, some of this will also be related to, what proportion of the population have been vaccinated. Once a lot of people are vaccinated, the case rates are going to go down. And so even though it still may be possible to carry the virus, the chances are that you'll be less likely to be exposed to it. And therefore, the chances of carrying it will go down. So we'll get to some critical points where, the prevention paradigm will accelerate. And I think once we're there, I would feel very comfortable in people dancing. There are also some commercial tests to measure antibodies. So people can actually get themselves tested to see if they're making an antibody. And if you've got an antibody response, the data would suggest you're pretty safe. Not 100%, there's always some risks, but I think it's a level of risk that we should all be willing to take.
Somebody was asking about the antibody tests. And so it is possible to get a reliable antibody test to find out if you are currently immune, but that doesn't mean you will necessarily stay immune forever. Is that correct?
Yes, we don't know how long these vaccines will last. People in the studies, we're going to continue to follow them. We're going to see how long their immune system lasts. Again, making an immune response against the virus. We'll see if over time we start to see more infections in people who have gotten vaccinated. Then we'll know whether or not we need to give people a boost. It may be that people will need to get a third shot. I can envision a day, though, where we're done with COVID-19. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't think this is going to be like the flu where you need to get a different shot every year. The vaccine, you've read about, the vaccine changing, and there's now a more easily transmissible form of the virus. That virus is prevented by the vaccine, that form of the virus. So the virus can change, but we're making an immune response that should be good against this. This is not going to be like the flu. It doesn't change the way the flu changes. So I think we'll be okay. It's going to take probably to the end of the summer before everybody has gotten vaccinated appropriately. But I think by the middle of the spring, we are going to be well on our way to getting most of the people in the US vaccinated. I'm an optimist, but I think that we're going to see, we're going to have a couple of more vaccines available quickly. I think the manufacturing is going to speed up. And I think we're going to get more people vaccinated at a faster pace.
Reliable quick tests, home tests, are those going to become available to us? Is that a pathway to some activities that we may want to engage in?
Yeah, the quick tests, they're not bad, but they're not as good as, sticking this little swab pretty deep into your nose. So that it's supposed to go back and, touch the back of your throat and be pretty irritating. That's the best test. The other tests will sometimes miss people early in infection when the level of virus is relatively low. The problem, with getting those tests is if you get a swab test today and you're negative, it doesn't mean that tomorrow you're not going to be positive. And people have the highest level of virus in their nasal secretions a day or two before they start to develop symptoms. So the tests give you a little bit of information, but it's not a guarantee that that you have nothing to worry about.
So you see universal vaccination in a population, like people who want to get together to dance tango, to be a much more plausible way than, for example, organizing an event where everybody would have a rapid test, for example, every day. And
if everybody had a rapid test, that's very reassuring. And I think that, again, it's what's the level of risk you're willing to tolerate. I would say if people were vaccinated and then they had a rapid test and they were negative, I would feel totally comfortable in dancing with that person.
Awesome. I like the double approach.
So, that's, I think, the kind of strategy that is very reassuring. It's probably not 100%, but again, if you've gotten the vaccine and you do get infected, chances are you're not going to get very ill from it. And if the people in your universe have been vaccinated, then the chances of them getting severely infected from you is less, because if you have a mild illness, the amount of virus in your nasal secretions is lower. So you're less likely to transmit your infection to somebody else. So having a milder illness, it's good for you, but it also means that you're less infectious. So again, some of these things are sort of additive or synergistic in the way they work together to prevent people from becoming infected or becoming severely ill.
And we could imagine that people might, in addition, be wearing masks. They might be vaccinated. They may or may not have a rapid test, and they would also protect themselves by wearing
If
masks.
people have been vaccinated and you're wearing a mask, I would dance with you.
Let's get there, man. Let's get there. There's a lot of questions about the timing of the second dose, since that's very much in the news. For example, Carol, who's in Montreal, says that they're now they've changed the timeline to be 90 days between the first and second dose of the 2-dose vaccines.
I think that that's okay. The level of antibodies that people are making after the first dose, I'm sure will last 90 days. Like I said, you saw that that level protects you. It's not that much different from the first dose to the second dose. So I think waiting that 90 days is a good public health decision.
Amazing. Felipe, who teaches Tango in San Francisco and around the world, is asking if you can posit a rate of infection per 100,000 that you could imagine saying, okay, it's safe for Tango to come back. I imagine that it's qualified by all the other things we just talked about, but.
It's hard for me to give a rate, because, things, you can see from the epidemic that you can go from a relatively low number to a relatively high number really fast. So, a low number may not be, something that you could say, if we knew that this rate in this community is 0.5%, tomorrow it could be 3% because the transmission curve is somewhat exponential. So it's hard for me to really, sort of talk in terms of give me a rate that's reassuring. I'd rather not do that, quite honestly.
Gerardo is asking, so one of the issues with COVID illness, right, is that even people who seem to have a mild case may then have a second wave or complications that make it very serious. How do we know that the vaccines, when they prevent people from getting ill, that they won't have those secondary consequences that we're reading about long haul COVID and such?
Yeah. Well, we're following the people who get infected in these studies very carefully. I showed you the Modernist study. I think there was less than 200 infections. Now there are over 500 infections, or 500 more infections, I think. So we'll learn that information very quickly. Because I'm involved in some of these studies, I'm on a conference call once a week where we get the latest information from all of these big studies that are happening. So there's a lot of information that we are going to have over the next month or so that will answer some of the questions that remain, perhaps help us develop some other kinds of strategies that will help keep us safe. But the chance of getting late complications is relatively low. The chance of getting a second infection is pretty small. The people who get a second infection, that second infection, when it's happened, it's been milder than the first. because people will develop their immune response against the virus will kick back in quickly. People who've had a more severe illness will end up making a better immune response than the people with milder illnesses. Those folks who've gotten a second illness generally have had a mild illness to begin with. The second illness is milder still, and those people have not been having severe complications. But the studies are following all of the people who get infected really carefully. The studies that we're doing are 2-year studies. Even though people will have been vaccinated long before those 2 years are up, we want to keep following people. We want to make sure that there's not any kind of late side effect that people will get. I'm not particularly concerned about that. We haven't been seeing late side effects from the vaccine, but we want to be totally assured that the vaccines are safe. And we want to make sure that there aren't late infections that occur. We want to see really what the tail end of that immune response is after 18 months on to 24 months to see if that antibody level is still there. Just to understand what the right strategy may need to be for the next pandemic that we have. This is the third coronavirus epidemic since 2002. There was SARS-CoV-1. You may remember that. That also started in Asia. There was a bad outbreak in Toronto. That illness was successfully eradicated because of very good infection control practices. People were quarantined, and we got rid of SARS-CoV-1. MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, there's always a few cases of that a year. You get it from camels, actually. So we only see it in the Middle East or in other people who've had exposure to camels. So this is the third one. Coronaviruses are common. We get coronaviruses all the time. Some coronaviruses are just common cold viruses that we handle. This one is a newer one, so our immune systems aren't particularly geared to handle it. But the ones that have been around for a long time, our immune system handles it. We may get a runny nose or cough for a day or fever, headache, and then they're gone. So we know a lot about coronaviruses. I'm sure there'll be another one someday. I hope it's not as severe as this one. There are virologists around the world that are capturing bats and other animals and trying to identify what viruses are infecting these animals, because those will be the viruses that will ultimately infect humans. Why is this happening? It's happening because there are a lot more humans than there used to be, and we are infringing upon the natural environments of wild animals. We're eating them. We're eating animals that we're not necessarily meant to eat. And because there are so many humans, if a few humans get infected, it's really easy for a whole bunch of other humans to get infected. 500 years ago, not that long ago in a evolutionary perspective, but 500 years ago, there weren't that many humans and we didn't live in crowded spaces. And so if a community got infected, there was the illness was confined to that community. There wasn't the kind of travel now that there is now. And so, we didn't see the rapid spread of these diseases the way we do today. So it's another important message. We need to be respectful of the environment. We need to be respectful of other animals. give them the space that they need to survive without, needing to come in contact with us.
Very, very important. We don't want to get out of this and go right into the next pandemic, right? No, no, we do not. Two more questions, just that.
Yes, Andre says, don't dance with camels.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway here. I think that's the takeaway. Thank you, Andres. Don't dance with camels. Someone was asking about how soon they can engage in activities after getting a vaccine. So can you just talk about how long it takes to get to maximum immunity for each individual, which is also a different question than when it could be safe to interact with other individuals?
Well, you've probably got a pretty maximum immune response 2 weeks after your second shot. So it happens pretty quickly. There, the level I showed you after your first shot is equivalent to what people get who get natural infection, who've been hospitalized, which is a higher antibody level than people who haven't been hospitalized. So just one shot gives you a pretty high level of antibody. We'll know a little bit more about this after we have the results from the Johnson & Johnson study, because that's a vaccine study where there was only one shot. And so we'll understand the difference between one shot and two shots a little bit more soon. But again, I think one shot of a good vaccine, and the ones we have available now are good vaccines, I think are very protective. And I think we should feel comfortable, not so comfortable that we need to ignore sensible precautions. There's still enough people that haven't been vaccinated that if you get a mild illness, even though it's just a mild illness for you, you could spread it to somebody else and they could get a severe illness. That's why we really can't let our guard down and stop wearing masks until, a good number of us have been vaccinated. And believe me, I'd love to get rid of my mask just as much as you want to get rid of your mask. So I know what it feels like.
I said two more questions. There's still two more questions. Mary Louise, don't go yet because I'm asking your question. Any idea when those in group 2, which is really group 4, when that group is going to be most of those people would be vaccinated?
Yeah, I think those people probably won't get vaccinated until the beginning of the summer. But so group 1 is about 20 million people. Group 1A is 20 million people. Group 1B is 80 million people. Group 1C is about 60 million people. So by the time we get through with group 1, more than half of the population is going to be vaccinated. And then at that point, infection rates are going to go way down. So although group 2 will be anxious to get their vaccine, I think they'll be getting their vaccine at a time when it's a lot more safer. It's safer. I'm hoping that we get the AstraZeneca vaccine approved. I hope we get that result quickly, and the Janssen study quickly. Those two studies should be resulted pretty soon. Then we'll have twice the number of vaccines that are available. I know that the manufacturing process is moving as quickly as it possibly can, and there's a lot of effort to try to even speed that up. There are other countries. You've read about the vaccine that was developed in China. it maybe works 50%. So it's not a great vaccine, but 50% is better than nothing. India is making its own vaccine. And the Indian pharmaceutical industry is very well developed. I bet you the vaccine that they make is very effective. We don't really know very much about the Russian vaccine at this point in time. There's not any reliable information about that vaccine, but there are a whole bunch of other vaccines that will be entering into the world marketplace, and these will be important. For group 2, it can't happen soon enough, and I hope it happens before the summer. But it's hard to make those predictions.
It is what it is. But if we get more vaccine approvals, it's going to help enormously, right?
Yes.
In terms of number of doses. All the variants that we're hearing about that have people scared for a lot of reasons, but still we believe that all the vaccines you're talking about would be effective against any of these variants that are appearing in different parts of the world. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. You don't have to worry about the South African, mutant virus. The reality is the virus that's circulating now is different than the virus that originated in Wuhan. The virus has already evolved. The vaccines that we're developing now are engineered against that original Wuhan virus, which, like I just said, is not the virus that's circulating right now. And so in a way, we already have proof that these vaccines will be effective against virus that mutates. Now you could say, well, maybe it will mutate in a way that it will avoid the vaccine. I don't think that that's going to happen with this virus, because it doesn't have the kind of plasticity that other viruses have. For the virus to mutate in a way that would avoid the vaccine, it would mutate in a way that would not make it infectious. The vaccine recognizes the shape of the virus, and for it to change so drastically that our immune response wouldn't recognize the shape would mean that the virus couldn't replicate. There's studies that are happening in pregnant women now. There's studies that are being designed for children now. These are important groups that we can't ignore. I know that there are some questions about that. We always do studies in kids after adults. Obviously, vaccinating kids are important. We want kids back in school. We want kids not to become infected because they infect their parents and grandparents and other folks. Most kids fortunately have mild illness, not all, but most. So it's one of the reasons why kids are sort of haven't been studied as early as adults, but those studies are moving forward.
And truly now the last question. First, someone was asking about fears about people having died of taking other vaccines. For people who are very afraid about taking this vaccine, what are your words?
Well, I understand the fear. We all have fears that others would perhaps say aren't rational. I still haven't danced at a milonga, in part because I'm afraid of it. And
that was before COVID.
That was before COVID.
Before there was a reason to be afraid of the milonga.
I got to get over that. And I'm not really saying that having a fear of the vaccine is the same as my fear of, dancing like that in a crowded space. But, I would say if you're fearful, look around, talk to people, pay attention to reliable sources of information. Do not get your information about medical issues from Facebook or Twitter. Read the New England Journal. You can look at it online. You can see what it says. You've got my email. You read the article, you got a question, send me an email. Listen to what experts say. I told you that I've gotten my vaccine. I told you that I want my loved ones to get the vaccine. My kids, I want them to get the vaccine. My ex-wife, I want my ex-wife to get the vaccine. I want my sister to get the vaccine. I love my sister. I don't mean to put her in the same, the category as my ex-wife, who I don't really dislike. But the point is that I would have to be crazy to say that, and to be giving myself and my loved ones something that would cause them danger. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. So you don't know me. Most of you don't know me. But there are people who you can talk to who hopefully you can trust. Some doctors are giving false information. So not every doctor, I think is giving reliable information, because not everybody understands this. And we've just lived through a year where the information about this particular illness has been so distorted. It's hard to know what information to trust. So you have to work a little bit. You've got to work to find out sources of information that you can trust. They are out there. There are people who you can trust. Tony Fauci, trust that man. That man will not lie to you. If Tony Fauci says, I'm getting my vaccine, I think everybody should get it. That dude is amazing. Listen to him. Our leaders are getting vaccinated in public now. All of the congressmen, that have been spreading, stories about, not needing to wear a mask, they've all been vaccinated. So look at what people are doing, not necessarily what they're saying. And then the people you trust, listen to what they're saying and what they're doing. And if what they're doing is what they're saying, and you can trust them, then, maybe you will be able to overcome your hesitancy. I get it. And believe me, a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking about this issue and talking about this issue. My team does a lot of community education work, particularly among minority communities, where there's a lot more distrust against the medical establishment. So I've heard a lot of the reasoning behind not wanting to get the vaccine. And all of them are legit. Whatever the issue is, it's fine to have that opinion. but there are a lot of reasons to get the vaccine. And I recommend you get it.
Dr. Frank, Ian, we are the most lucky Tango community in the world to have you part of us. We are so, so grateful. So it's going to take a while still, but we are going to get to a point where we're all in a milonga together, right? It's going to happen.
It is going to
take
happen.
a while.
It is going to happen. You know, it's so we've, you know, this is the hard part right now, because we've been through this for the past year. We're tired. It's changed, you know, how we interact with our families and friends. Our work may have been damaged, you know, careers have been turned upside down. People have lost livelihoods, and it's not over yet. Now, really, more than at any other point, we need to find our resolve. And we need to figure out how to work together as a community to get through this. And Meredith, I just want to thank you again for organizing this. I think that, you know, this is the kind of thing that's, you know, it's good for me to have this kind of opportunity. I hope it's good for the folks in the Tango community to hear from somebody who does this work. But it's the way that we can reassure each other in different ways, you know. And if I've given you a little bit more hope or ability to get through the next month, you know, and be able to handle this, that's great. You know, I'd be thankful for that. And, you know, you will all return the favor, I am quite sure, in a different way. So, you know, we need each other. And, you know, Zoom, obviously it's not perfect, right? You know, but it is a way for us to have some contact. And I spend a lot of time thinking about people I care about and remembering what those folks mean to me. And that includes people I've met through Tango and my Tango experience, because it's a relatively new hobby of mine, and it's really been a wonderful thing. So this particular community I have found to be just truly amazing, wonderful people. So I hope that we can stay connected in a way that will help us. And it's that first Milonga, I'll be there, you know, because it's just going to be awesome, you know?
It's going to be awesome. We're all going to get vaccinated and you're going to go to a milonga. That's what's going to happen, right, everybody? I'm going to make this video available to all of you. I know there was, you know, I can't remember everything that I want to from it. I'm sure you feel the same way. So I will make the video available to you. I will send you Dr. Frank Ian's email address if you have follow-up questions. But now just please join me in unmuting and giving the biggest, most raucous round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Dr. Frank is going to be the most popular guy on the Milonga floor
Yeah.
when we get a
Ian.
chance. Yeah. All right. I have a message from some special. Oh, Sheldon misses
Sheldon.
you very much. Yeah,
I
he
miss
misses all
Sheldon.
of you.
It's not here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So he's waiting for you on some future Wednesday, right at this time. I don't know when it is, but we're waiting for you when it's safe and possible. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Love you all. And Dr. Ian.
Thank you again.
Be safe, everybody.
Good night, everyone.